Good morning. Singing, again, just sounded great. So much easier to come up here when everybody sounds enthused. So thank you, and thank you again to all the song leaders that work really hard. I think it's tougher than preaching. I'm just going to tell you now. So I appreciate all those of you that lead singing. So for the next 3 weeks, we are going to zero in on God's love letter with a very specific focus. Our goal is to look at some of the scientific statements that the Bible makes. And it makes quite a few. It's not a science book, but it has several scientific statements in it. And the amazing thing, and I hope this is the message that you get this week, next week, and the third week. I hope you get this message that how did these people that wrote the Bible, 40 of them altogether, right? Farmers, sheep herders, a fig picker, a couple of kings, most uneducated. A few were educated, Luke, Paul, Moses, Daniel, I may be missing one, Solomon. But how did these ordinary, unscientific, uneducated people, how did they know this stuff? Because we're going to look at the scientific statements intentionally that defied the current belief of the day. Sometimes these scientific statements that God reveals to his people, sometimes they defied, went against, contradicted the scientific belief set for 3,000 years. I know of at least 4 of them that contradicted science teachers, science philosophers, contradicted them for 3,000 years. And in every case, when the dust settled, the Bible was right, and the scientists, the smartest minds in the world at the time, were wrong. How can that be? How is it even possible? They didn't have telescopes and microscopes and altimeters and all the scientific satellites and the Hubble, whatever it's called. There's only one possibility for these incredible scientific statements to be revealed in this ancient book. Some of it was written 4,000 years ago. One book, probably the book of Job. Some of it by Moses 3,500 years ago. Some of it as recent as 2,000 years ago. Can you think of another book, religious or scientific? There are a lot of both. Do you know of another book in the world, in existence, that has 3 scientific statements that contradicted the science beliefs of its day, and all 3 came true? Because I don't know one. But this, so far I've found about 30. I've really put some time into 15 of them, and we're going to look at about half of that. Maybe 7. We'll see how I do here. But just incredible things, and the statements themselves, let me say one more thing. The statements themselves that the Bible makes are not going to impress you, because you've known them all your life. The Bible talks about the earth, we'll look at this one today, hangs on nothing. You knew that. The earth is spherical. Well, you've known that all your life. You know, maybe your family have one of these things, and so you just knew from very early, or at least your classroom did in elementary school, had a globe, and everybody knows the earth is round. Really? Really? For 3,000 years after the Bible talks about the circle of the earth, for 3,000 years, no one knew that it was round. 3 Greeks, maybe after 1,000 years, Aristotle, Plato, and one other guy whose name I can't pronounce or remember, they said, we think the earth is round. But for 2,000 more years after that, the world didn't believe them. No, it's flat. So how can that be? Because God, in his love letter to us, revealed these things. And so he revealed them maybe for many reasons, but two that I can think of are this: to bless us, because some of these scientific statements, knowing them, can save your life. And secondly, not just bless us, because his whole love letter, the whole Bible is meant to be a blessing to us, but it reveals his glory. There's no other book like it that disagrees with science books. When I use science, by the way, science is just the knowledge, basically. Knowledge, and so knowledge is not at fault here. We're talking about man's flawed ideas of science. They're mistaken beliefs of science when I'm comparing the Bible to science. See if there's anything else I want to open up with before we get down to business here. I think I'll just say this, yes. We're going to look at two scientific statements the Bible makes, one in Leviticus, one in Numbers and Leviticus as well, that had the world known these things early on. Oh, no. If the world would have known them just 200 years ago, not 3,000 when they were written, if the world would have known them just 200 years ago, lives would have been saved. Not hundreds, not thousands. Millions of lives would have been saved. And the people whose lives would have been saved also would have not gone through the excruciating pain that they endured because people either didn't know what the Bible said or didn't believe it. Next week, one of my very favorite, we've gone over it in detail before, the life of the flesh is in the blood, Leviticus 17:11. But George Washington's doctors didn't believe that. And that's why they prematurely killed our first president, because they didn't believe what the Bible said. So impactful. And these very things, some of these scientific statements affect your life today, now that man has discovered them and follows them. It affects your economics, but most likely it saved some of our lives by the statements that are now known to be true. So that's kind of a precursor to where we're going. So we're looking at the Bible versus science, man's believed science. And the first one, main point, there's only two today. The first one is the earth hangs on nothing. What does that mean? Some of you know. And the second one is this, that we're going to look at hygiene and quarantine laws in the Bible. And that has saved some of our lives and would have saved millions more. All right, so let's go ahead and begin. The earth hangs on nothing. That's found in Job chapter 26 and verse 7. If you have your Bibles, well, you can read it off the screen, I suppose. But my wife always checks me, and she finds when I make mistakes, too. So good idea to open your Bible. If you have one, Job 26, verse 7, it says, and this is probably the oldest book in the Bible. Most believe that Job was written between 1500 BC and 2000 BC. Can't prove it for sure, but it is one of the most ancient in the Bible. And here's what Job said through the inspiration of God. He, meaning God, he stretches out the north over empty space and hangs the earth on nothing. On nothing. Now, you may think that this was the question, but it wasn't. That's not the question. That the earth stooping down pops this mic out. Give me a second here. This was the question. That was the question. Because this represents the earth. And as late as 1700s, like China, still believed that the earth was flat, but most of the people on the earth believed the earth was flat until 1400 and something. So they weren't asking, so they asked, well, what holds the earth up? What keeps it from falling? What keeps the earth from tipping over? What holds it up? But like I said, this was not the question. They didn't picture a ball in space. They pictured a flat plane, not quite this small, but they pictured something flat. What holds it up? As they look at the stars and the sun and the moon circling overhead on a daily basis. So we're going to start with that question right there. And by the way, so look at what the different civilizations believed. The Egyptians, this is documentable. By the way, I got some of these facts off. I just went to AI and said, hey, which societies believe the earth was flat and which societies didn't think the earth was flat? And the answer is they all thought it was flat. And here's what they believed. The Egyptians, they thought the earth was supported by mountains at the four corners because it's not moving, right? You look up in the sky and you see the stars and they move, but the earth doesn't. Something has to hold it, keep it from falling. The Hindus, they believed that the earth rested on the backs of giant elephants, which in turn stood on a big turtle. And then, and this is real. People were taught this as children, like you were taught that the earth is round. People were taught this is how the universe is, how it's designed. The Greeks believed that Atlas, actually, if you study it hard, Atlas, the Titan that held up the, he didn't really. The Greeks taught that Atlas held up the sky, but it morphed over the centuries into, especially in Europe, Atlas holding up the earth, whatever. The point is they believed that it was supported by a titan, by a giant, strong man. And then the Babylonians, they thought the earth floated in an infinite ocean. It just floated. Finally, the Chinese, they thought the sky was a solid dome covering the flat earth. And I just couldn't figure it out. Well, how does the dome hold stuff, keep the earth immobile? I don't know. But this is what they thought. That the earth was covered by, the sky was a solid dome and kind of held the earth in place. So there you go. These are current thoughts of the day. So, do those things seem silly to you? Because they might to us, because we know. Didn't to people back then. Plato, Socrates, all the smart people, they said, here's how it works. Okay, well, they know what they're talking about. It must work that way. Respected scientists, respected philosophers. So we're going to compare science over thousands of years to what the Bible has to say, and there's lots of disagreement. I'll share a few of those with you. I hope you just see the power of God. How could these humble people, fishermen, know these truths? Because they didn't have the ability to detect them on their own. Here's the date, till 1543 AD. Scholars believed in the Ptolemy system, that Earth was rigidly supported without movement, and all movement was in the heavens, that we were the center. And the reason we could watch the stars and the sun and all those things move is because we're in the center, fixed, not moving, and everything else revolves around the earth. You've heard some of this in school, but I'm just refreshing your memory. So God says no. He says, number one, it's not rigidly supported. He says, just give me a second. And hangs the earth upon nothing. He's talking about the globe we live in right now. So, a couple of things here. I said that already. So Isaac Newton, you've heard of him, smart guy. With the help of the newly invented telescope, He discovered the law of gravity and also the fact that the earth is round. We'll talk about that next week. No one else believed it at the time except for 3 Greeks. And that we, in fact, are in great motion. The earth is not suspended on anything. The earth, let's pretend that, now that we know the earth is round and have known it, this would be the earth right here. And Isaac Newton says, no, it's not suspended and it's not falling. In fact, it's in great motion. Anybody know how fast the earth, not is orbiting, it's about 1,000 miles. Anybody know how fast the earth is? Yeah, it is orbit. Well, it's not spinning. That has a different speed. Anybody know how fast the earth is traveling through space as it orbits the sun? You don't have to tell me, but just raise your hand if you think you know. Okay, because I didn't. The earth is traveling around the sun 67,000 miles an hour. I don't even understand those figures. 67, how can some, what was that? Well, it was a huge earth. I didn't see anything. So Isaac Newton figured out that we're in motion. Well, what holds it in place? And a guy named Arnold Schnabel, who wrote a short book, he used this illustration that I liked. This ball is the earth, right here. This string is gravity. My hand is the sun. And he says it works like this. That the sun is pulling the earth in with gravity, trying to pull it into its fiery furnace. But the earth is moving so fast, 67,100 miles an hour, that it can't pull. It doesn't budge. It doesn't get closer. It doesn't get farther away. It just keeps circling the sun. I practiced that. I got a few bruises. But the balance. This globe, which weighs 1 billion trillion tons, according to the scientists, is traveling 67,000 miles per hour, and it can't break free of the sun's gravity. But look at the balance here. If the earth were to slow down, I don't know how much. I don't know my physics that well. But if the earth were to slow down some, the earth would suck it into the fire. No more earth. If God, for some reason, shut off the gravity of the sun, if you just turned it off for a little while, what would happen to the earth? What would happen to this ball if I let the string go? It'd go in a straight line. So would the earth if God turns off the gravity. It would go into space 67,000 miles an hour. Look at the balance. I can't believe it. It's just perfectly balanced. It stays. It's been in position as long as man has been alive for thousands of years. I'm blown away by that thought. And then the moon. The moon isn't traveling nearly as fast. It's about 2,200 miles an hour, circling around the earth, but the earth is so much smaller than the sun. The sun is 1.3 billion times bigger than the earth. That the moon doesn't have to go nearly as fast not to get sucked in and crash into the earth. It goes 2,200 miles an hour, and it's been in place ever since God made the earth. Incredible to me. So we know how it works now, but we didn't when Job wrote this. We didn't know how it worked for 3,000 to 3,500 years after Job wrote that he hangs the earth. Oops, I got the wrong one up, but you saw it. He hangs the earth on nothing, Job 26:7. So Isaac Newton figured all this stuff out. He was one smart guy and a Bible believer. I think we'll move on from that. But what a great system that God has. None of the planets in the existence time of the earth have ever been sucked into the sun, nor have they broken off. Maybe they will someday. God doesn't promise that Mercury will always be in his place. Maybe he'll let it go. I don't know, but the balance still is just phenomenal how God did that, and yet some people say it's all by chance and it just exploded into existence and these perfect balances were set up. I'm not an evolutionist, even though I was in college. All right. I talked about that. Perfect balance. Okay. We're going to talk about hygiene and scientific views. Hygiene laws in the Bible and quarantine laws in the Bible versus the thought of the day for 3,500 years, 30,000, 3,500 years after the Bible was written. So, ancient scientific views. Even as recently as during the Civil War, they had all kinds of inventions and smart people and war weapons. They didn't understand diseases or infections. Many believed sicknesses were caused by evil spirits or curses rather than germs. They didn't know what a germ was. You can't see it with your naked eye. So they thought they were evil spirits or curses. No hygiene standards existed except among the Jews who had the law of God in the Old Testament and the New Testament, by the way. Luke, well, whatever you call the book of Luke, it's kind of in between. Luke 10. Remember in verse 34 what the Samaritan does when he sees the wounded man almost dead on the side of the road? He has compassion on him. And in verse 34, I think I probably wrote it down for you. No, I'm ahead of myself, but that's all right. Jesus, telling about the event, said he saw the man about dead. He bandaged his wounds, key phrases now, pouring wine and oil on them. Hygiene. The wine, probably alcoholic, killed the infection from all that. This guy was in bad shape, right? So he poured wine on it to disinfect the wounds, and oil, which would soften the scar tissue and promote healing. So Jesus tells about this in Luke just 2,000 years ago. The Jews knew about hygiene laws. So here's one of them. In the book of Leviticus 13, the whole chapter is and more. There's a lot on hygiene, but the whole chapter is about hygiene. And these two verses read, as for the leper who has the infection, his clothes shall be torn, and the hair of his head shall be uncovered, and he shall cover his mustache and cry, unclean. I think some of the versions say his upper lip, but he shall cover his mustache or his upper lip, kind of like a mask does. It covers your nose and what you breathe out. So he shall cover his mustache and cry, unclean, unclean. Because leprosy would kill you normally. There are some exceptions. And it was contagious. So he shall remain unclean all the days during which he has the infection. He is unclean. He shall live alone, quarantine. A lot of societies didn't quarantine people. But he shall live alone. He's quarantined now. His dwelling shall be outside the camp, outside Israel, where Israel lives. So there's a quarantine law. They still use that today. Hygiene laws. The one who touches the corpse of any person shall be unclean for 7 days. Somebody had to touch him. Somebody in your family died. They didn't have 911 those days. You know, unless you were a priest, you would move your loved one. Part of the life cycle. But the one who touches the corpse of any person shall be unclean for 7 days. That one shall purify himself from uncleanness with water. So, number one, it teaches washing here and other places as well. But he shall purify himself from uncleanness with the water on the 3rd day and on the 7th day. Then he will be clean. But if he does not purify himself on the 3rd day and the 7th day, you will not be clean. So we have quarantine laws and we have hygiene laws. Isolate, stay clean, wash. These next two passages, these two passages that I just read from Leviticus and Numbers, they were written about 1,500 years before Christ. So a long time ago, about 3,500 years from today. Yet for the next 3,300 years, written 3,500 years ago, for 3,300 years, people didn't believe these laws. In fact, they resisted them. I'll give you an example. Doctors resisted them, and they even mocked the people that believed in quarantining and not washing. So here's one example. This doctor, he's Hungarian, but he went to school in Austria. Semmelweis, medical degree in 1844 in Vienna, University of Vienna, Austria. His specialty was the field of childbirth and maternal care. So there was something called puerperal. Is that a word you use today at all? Puerperal? Okay. Fever was a deadly infection that killed thousands of women after childbirth, but mainly women in hospitals. The mortality rate in maternity wards is extremely high, where he was only about 18%, but in some maternity wards, 1 out of 3 women who went in to have a baby would die in the hospital. 1 out of 3, 30%. So there were 2 maternity wards that existed in the Vienna General Hospital, 2 maternity wards. The first maternity ward was run by doctors and medical students. The second clinic was run by midwives. The clinic that was run by doctors had a super high mortality rate. About 1 in 5 women that went in died, just giving birth. Super high. The maternity ward run by the midwives, really low mortality rate. So he investigated why. What's going on here? Why so high among the doctors and not the midwives? Here, as he watched procedures, here's what happened. These doctors often, that worked in the maternity ward, would work on cadavers earlier in the day. Oh, I wonder what this guy did. Whatever they were doing, they worked on cadavers, dead people. Then without washing, they would go deliver babies. And so Semmelweis, he realized the doctors were transferring what he called cadaverous particles, germs, from dead bodies, transfer them from dead bodies to the pregnant women. He ordered the medical staff, and I don't know what kind of authority he has, I'm just telling you what history says here. He ordered the medical staff to wash their hands. Oh, but I don't know if I said it, but the midwives were not touching cadavers. They had one specialty, delivering babies. They weren't touching cadavers. The doctors were. Lots of people in the doctor's clinic were dying. So Semmelweis ordered the medical staff to wash their hands with a chlorine solution before touching patients. The death rate in the doctor's clinic went from 18% to 2%. That's like 900% less. 18 women out of 100 were dying in their hospital. 2 out of 100 after they started washing their hands. Were the doctors happy? Not at all. They hated it. They considered it an insult to their profession. It was inconvenient. I'm a professional doctor. I shouldn't have to wash my hands. And they opposed him so strongly that they had Semmelweis removed from the hospital, gone, so they could go back to their old practices. I don't know how many women would have been saved. But that's just one hospital. Some hospitals, 30%. 1 out of every 3 women that went in died. So would have saved a lot of lives had they have been into hygiene. But instead of, even after looking at the evidence, they hated it and refused to do it. They weren't aware of the germ theory yet, but they thought, oh, you expect me to believe in something I can't even see? These germs, or whatever you call them, cadaverous particles. Anyway, they were insulted. They fought it. They won. He lost. And so did the lives of many women were lost as well. Okay. 14 years later. This is another example of when science ignored the Bible. 14 years later, the U.S. Civil War began in 1861. Hygiene was ignored, and the result, a public health disaster. Unbelievable, as I will show you the stats in just a moment. The germ theory was not widely accepted to believe that there's germs you can't see that can kill you. Most doctors did not believe that disease was caused by invisible microbes. Surgeons often didn't wash their hands or their instruments between patients. And I make a point not to get too graphic, but I need to say a little bit that's no more graphic than some of the things in the Bible. And a few doctors that washed, they had stagnant, old, dirty water. But one Confederate doctor did 30 amputations with a rusty saw and never washed it once. 30. And so gangrene. All kinds of disease was rampant during the Civil War, so medical tools were repeatedly used with no sterilization. Wounds were... Here they've handled some people, maybe some dead people, but they handled a lot of people that are sick and dying, and then with unwashed hands, they probe the wound. Well, see if I can find the bullet in there. And they would introduce germs from one soldier into another that didn't have them yet. And so amputations were common and performed in very quick succession in unsanitary conditions. They didn't wear gloves, masks, or use antiseptics. So here's a little comparison between science of the day, science beliefs of the day, and the Bible. On the left, Numbers says, wash after touching dead bodies, Numbers 19, 11, and 12. Civil War, doctors often didn't wash their hands after surgeries or handling corpses. Leviticus 15:13, use running water to wash hands and your clothes. The tools and uniforms were reused. Unwashed bloody bandages, without washing them, were reused on the next patient. Just rampant disease and infection. Water was often stagnant and contaminated. Leviticus 13 says, isolate the sick and the leprous. Mainly the leprous, but the idea is there. Someone has something contagious, keep them away from healthy people until they get better. In the Civil War, in both camps, the Feds and the Confederates, there was no quarantine. Infected soldiers stayed in crowded camps and hospitals. Leviticus 13 taught to burn or cleanse contaminated clothing, and it gave specifics on how to do that. I already said this when bloody bandages were reused. Avoid touching diseased or unclean people in Leviticus 5. Surgeons touch open wounds with unwashed hands and bare fingers. So what kind of result did they have? I didn't know this, so just check this out. During the Civil War, they didn't keep great records. So we know at least 620 soldiers died. A lot of statisticians believe it was about 700,000. That's a lot of people died. Well, from what? Well, out of the 650,000, 700,000, 140,000 were killed in combat. 115,000 died of wounds. Oh, shot in the gut, not going to make it. They didn't know how to fix people. That's not even half of the deaths. 350,000 to 400,000 of the deaths during the Civil War were due to disease and infection unnecessarily because they didn't follow the instruction of God's love letter and follow quarantining or hygiene principles. Some stats say it's 2 out of 3 soldiers that died in the Civil War didn't die from war things. Died from contagious malaria and typhoid and dysentery and gangrene. So today's lesson was the most gruesome, in my opinion, of the 3 weeks, and I hope it wasn't too gruesome, but we need to know the facts. We need to understand, wow, this is serious stuff. You choose to ignore God's word, and wow, the results are consequential. So today's lesson, and we can't go back, by the way, even though it's gruesome, we can't go back and save these people. Hopefully a bunch of them were Christians. There were a lot of believers back then, but we can do something about that today. Teach our children, and most of you do. This is old hat. I'm not trying to impress you with the fact, with the scientific statement. I'm trying to impress you with the fact that the Bible said it when no one believed it. Untrained, uneducated people. What are the chances of that happening 30 times? Because I can count about that many so far in the Bible. There's only one possibility, that the Creator, the one who made the laws, the hygiene laws, the health laws, the one who gave us the right way to live, He knows the laws, and He gave us the instruction on how to prosper and do better. Excuse me. So every command is given to us to bless us, and I hope we see the practical value of following the Bible. So, over the next 3 weeks, I want to continue to compare God's Word with man's philosophies and science ideas, and a little bit on a few of the other books that compete for your soul. Just a little bit. Because they exist. But what I'm going to propose is this. There are other books that claim that they are inspired by God or Allah. See whether you research on AI or you're a prolific reader, see if you can find a book with even 3 scientific statements that oppose the science thought of the day that are true. That they didn't show the book was wrong, because I don't know of one. And that is what I want to impress us with. This is unbelievable. There's no book in the world like it. So if you are a searcher, let's say you're not a Christian yet, whether it's online, because I know some people are watching today, or you're here and you're still mulling it over, ask these probing questions. How can that be? How can this have 30 scientific statements that oppose the greatest minds of the day when it was written? And in every case, the Bible's right and they were wrong. Now, there's a few things still up in the air, still being debated. Evolution, for instance, right? Well, I think you put that to rest in your class in evolution, but not everybody agrees with that. No, I still believe in evolution. But for the most part, most of the statements made in here have been proven to be true, and none have been proven to be false, and that should just boggle the unbeliever's mind, and at least cause them to search and look into it, because your soul is worth it. Even your physical life is worth the investigation. So that's the end of our lesson today. Thank you. I hope it was helpful. If you have questions, run them by me. We just want to spread the truth. That's what we're about. Wherever it is, wherever it comes from, we want the truth, and God will bless us in that way. So this time, if you are interested in becoming a Christian or have a prayer needs, just come forward. We'll be standing and sing the song of invitation.